I still remember that night. The air was cool, and the lights in the dining room cast long, soft shadows across the walls. Everything seemed normal at first. My husband, my stepdaughter, and I were sitting together, waiting for dinner. But I had felt a strange tension all day, something I couldn't quite explain. My stepdaughter, Emily, had been quiet since morning. Usually, she would run around, laugh, or even tease me in her usual playful way, but that day she barely spoke. I tried to brush it off as teenage moodiness, but deep inside, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the house, mixing with the faint scent of flowers from the vase on the table. My husband was talking about his work, and I smiled politely, trying to join the conversation, but Emily's silence made the room feel heavier. When we all finally sat down at the table, I noticed she didn't pull her chair all the way in. She was half standing, half sitting, with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on her plate. I asked her how her day was, trying to sound casual, but she only shrugged and muttered something I couldn't hear. Then, without warning, she looked up straight at me, and her voice was sharp, clear, and cold. "This table is only for real family." I froze. My fork trembled slightly in my hand. I didn't know what to say. My husband, on the other side of the table, blinked and gave a nervous laugh, trying to cover up the awkwardness, but the words hung in the air like a heavy fog. "What do you mean, Emily?" he asked softly. Her eyes were cold, but there was also something I couldn't quite read: pain, anger, or maybe suspicion. She didn't answer. She just looked away, pushing her plate slightly as if she didn't want to be there at all. My heart pounded, and I suddenly felt like an intruder in my own home. I had tried so hard to connect with Emily since I married her father. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to trust me, to love me. But those words cut through everything I had hoped for. I didn't know what had caused her to feel this way, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed unusually loud. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Even the sound of the knife cutting through the chicken seemed sharper, more tense. I tried to speak, to explain myself, to show her that I cared, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. Every word I wanted to say seemed inadequate. Emily stayed quiet, staring at the table, not meeting my eyes. It was then that I noticed a small detail I had never seen before: the folded piece of paper she had tucked under her plate. It was old, crumpled, and almost hidden. I didn't want to look at it, but something in me was drawn to it. My curiosity battled with my fear. What could it be? A note? A message? Something that explained why she felt this way about me, about us? As dinner continued, the tension grew. My husband tried to make conversation, talking about a new project at work, about plans for the weekend, but Emily barely responded. Every laugh or comment he made seemed to bounce off an invisible wall around her. I wanted to reach across the table, to touch her hand, to tell her that she was safe, that she didn't have to feel like an outsider. But before I could move, Emily picked up the paper under her plate and, without a word, stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. My heart jumped. She clutched the paper tightly, and I could see her knuckles turning white. Her eyes darted toward her father, then to me, and then she ran out of the dining room, leaving her untouched plate behind. Silence fell like a blanket over the room. My husband and I looked at each other, speechless. I could hear the faint sound of her footsteps echoing down the hallway, fading into the distance. I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of fear, confusion, and guilt. I wanted to follow her, to ask her what was wrong, to explain myself. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear of pushing her away further. Maybe it was the feeling that this moment was bigger than me, something I didn't understand yet. I glanced at the piece of paper she had left on the table. It was folded neatly, but the way she had held it told me it was important, urgent even. My hands trembled as I reached for it, wondering what secrets it held, what truths I had never known. As I unfolded the paper, my eyes widened. There were words written in neat, almost childish handwriting, but the message was chilling: some secrets should never be told at this table. My breath caught. My mind raced. What could this mean? Was it about me? About my husband? Or was it something far older, something I had no idea existed in our family? I looked at the empty dining chair, imagining Emily's angry, hurt face. I wanted to call her back, to apologize, to beg her to tell me what was happening, but the words stuck in my throat. And then I heard a faint whisper from the hallway, barely audible, almost like the wind through the cracks of the old house, "You don't belong here." My heart stopped. I looked around, but no one was there. The house was quiet, too quiet. The clock ticked loudly, mocking the silence. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something had changed that night. Something had shifted in Emily's world, and now, without warning, it had pulled me into a mystery I was not ready for. I could feel my safe, ordinary life unraveling in front of me, thread by thread, and the truth, whatever it was, seemed just out of reach, hidden behind her anger, her fear, and that cryptic note. I knew one thing for certain: I had to find out what it meant. I had to know why she said those words, why she ran, and what secrets were hiding in our family. But as I picked up the note again, my hands trembling, I realized that I wasn't prepared for what I might discover. And just as I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, I heard the soft sound of footsteps returning, slow and deliberate. Emily was coming back. Emily's footsteps grew closer, slow but heavy, echoing in the hallway like the beat of a warning drum. I still remember that moment. The air in the dining room felt thick, almost suffocating, and I couldn't tell if my heart was pounding from fear or anticipation. When she stepped back into the room, her eyes were dark, guarded, almost like a storm was brewing behind them. She didn't speak at first. She just stood there, clutching the paper to her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her safe. I wanted to move toward her, to bridge the distance, but my body felt frozen. Every instinct screamed at me to act carefully. I didn't want to push her away further. My husband tried to break the silence with a casual tone, but his words felt hollow. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked, but she didn't answer him either. Her eyes flicked between us, sharp and calculating, and then rested on me. I could see the hurt and anger simmering beneath her calm surface. I swallowed hard. "Emily, please. I just want to understand," I said softly, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. Instead, she sat down slowly, the chair creaking under her weight, and placed the folded paper in front of her. My pulse raced. It felt like the room had grown smaller, like the walls were closing in around us, waiting for some truth to surface. I reached for the paper, hesitating, unsure if I was ready for what it might say. Emily's hand shot out and grabbed it first, her grip firm, almost desperate. "You shouldn't read this," she said quietly, but there was a tremor in her voice. She looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before, and it broke something inside me. I wanted to tell her that I was on her side, that she could trust me, but before I could speak, she stood up again, her movements sudden and erratic. She started pacing, her steps sharp against the hardwood floor. "You don't get it," she cried, and the sound of her voice made my chest tighten. "What don't I get, Emily?" I asked, my voice low, careful not to scare her further. She stopped pacing and stared at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "This table, this house, everything you call family, it's not real to me," she shouted. Her words hit me like a slap, leaving me momentarily breathless. I wanted to understand, to apologize for any pain I had unknowingly caused, but I also felt a surge of confusion and fear. Why was she so angry? Why did she feel this way about me, about us, about her father? My husband tried to intervene, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off. "Don't touch me." "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. Then, almost in a whisper, she added, "Some secrets are not meant to be shared with outsiders." My stomach churned. I could feel my body growing cold. The words echoed in my mind like a warning. Outsiders? Was she talking about me, about her father, or someone else entirely? I didn't know. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Emily, I'm not an outsider. I'm your stepmother. I care about you. I want us to be a family, I said softly, but she didn't seem to hear me. Her gaze had shifted to the hallway, to some invisible point beyond the walls, as if she was listening to something I couldn't hear. My skin prickled, and I realized the air had grown colder. A faint draft brushed against my arm, though all the windows were closed. Something about the house felt different, as if it held its own secrets, waiting to reveal themselves. Suddenly, Emily's expression changed. She seemed smaller, almost frightened, and she whispered, barely audible, "I saw it. I saw what they did." My stomach dropped. I had no idea what she was talking about. "Saw what?" I asked, leaning closer, but before she could answer, the lights in the dining room flickered. The soft, warm glow of the lamps dimmed, casting strange, dancing shadows across the walls. The sound of the clock ticking grew louder, irregular, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to the room. Emily flinched and hugged the paper tightly again, almost as if it were a shield. I tried to reach her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "No! You can't know yet. You're not ready," she said. My heart raced. "Emily, please. I need to understand. I need to help you," I pleaded. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with fear and something else, something darker, something I didn't recognize. Then, without warning, she bolted toward the hallway, the paper slipping from her hands onto the floor. I froze, my chest tight, as the sound of her running footsteps faded once more. I looked down at the paper lying on the floor. Part of me wanted to pick it up immediately, but another part of me hesitated. Whatever was written there, it had shaken Emily to her core. It wasn't just a note, it was a key to something much bigger, something I wasn't prepared to face yet. The room felt heavier, almost suffocating, and I realized that whatever secrets were hidden in our family were starting to surface. I could feel it. Then I heard a soft, almost inaudible whisper again, this time coming from the kitchen. "You shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. The voice sounded eerily familiar, yet I knew there was no one in the house besides us. I slowly turned toward the sound, my heart hammering in my chest. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, moving in ways they shouldn't. I could feel the tension growing, thickening the air. Something was in this house, something that Emily had sensed long before I did. I picked up the paper cautiously, my hands trembling. There were more words written inside, carefully folded lines of a story I had never known. As I unfolded it, a chill ran down my spine. The message was simple but terrifying: they are watching. They never forget. Stay away from the table. I froze. The words burned into my mind, leaving a hollow feeling in my chest. Watching? Who was watching? And why? The peaceful home I had imagined, this safe place I had hoped to share with Emily, was not what it seemed. Something dark and hidden was waiting beneath the surface, and now it had noticed me. And just as I gathered my courage to call out for Emily, I heard the faint sound of a door creaking open somewhere upstairs. A slow, deliberate sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. I wasn't alone anymore. I still remember that night, how the creaking of the upstairs door made the entire house feel alive, as if it were breathing around me. My hands were clutching the note, and my heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to do first: run after Emily, investigate the sound, or just stay frozen where I was. The shadows on the walls stretched and flickered as the dim dining room lights swayed, casting shapes that seemed almost human. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, and my stomach tightened with a mix of fear and anticipation. The note in my hand, with its cryptic warnings, burned against my fingers. They are watching. They never forget. Stay away from the table. Those words replayed in my mind like a sinister echo. Watching? Who were they? I had no answers, and the uncertainty made the house feel like a trap. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My eyes scanned the hallway, the staircase leading upstairs, and the doors of every room. The faint draft that had been brushing my arm earlier returned, cold and sharp, carrying with it a whisper that was almost impossible to hear. "You shouldn't be here." My throat went dry. It felt like the house itself was warning me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadow shifting quickly at the top of the stairs. My first instinct was to call out for Emily, to warn her, but my voice caught in my throat. I wasn't sure if I would get a response, or if speaking would draw attention to myself. I crept slowly toward the stairs, each step deliberate, trying not to make a sound. The house was eerily quiet now, except for my own shallow breathing and the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath me. The shadow at the top of the stairs seemed to linger, watching me. I wanted to run, to chase Emily, to grab her and take her away from whatever danger this house held, but something told me to pause. My instinct screamed that rushing would make things worse. Something about that shadow, it wasn't human, at least not fully. It moved in a strange, jerky way, like it was slipping in and out of sight. As I reached the base of the stairs, a loud thud echoed from upstairs, startling me so much that I nearly dropped the note. My heart jumped, and I could feel a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I could hear Emily's soft voice calling something I couldn't make out, distant but urgent, as if she were trapped somewhere. I felt a surge of panic, realizing that she might be in danger. I needed to find her, but I had no idea which room she had gone into, and every shadow seemed to hide something unknown. I climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing tightly, listening intently for any sound. My mind raced with questions. Why had Emily been so angry at the dinner table? What did she see that made her so afraid? And who, or what, was watching her, or watching me now? The house, which had once felt safe, now seemed alive with secrets. I could feel eyes on me, though I couldn't see anyone. Every creak, every sigh of the wind through the walls, felt like a warning. Reaching the top of the stairs, I saw Emily's bedroom door slightly ajar. A faint light glowed from inside. I pushed the door gently, my heart in my throat. The room looked normal at first, her bed neatly made, posters on the walls, books on the shelf, but then I noticed her on the floor, sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, the note clutched tightly in her hands. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and scared, and whispered, "They're here. They're always here. You can't stay." Before I could respond, the door behind me slammed shut with a loud bang. I jumped, my hands flying to the handle, but it wouldn't budge. My breathing became ragged. I turned to Emily, who was staring at me, her face pale and tense. "You don't understand," she said, shaking slightly. "They're not human. They've been watching our family for years. They punish anyone who sits at the table, anyone who tries to be part of the family." My mind reeled. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, that it was just her imagination, but something in her voice, the fear in her eyes, and the strange energy in the room made me stop. I could feel it too, a presence, invisible but heavy, pressing down on me. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I could see my breath in the dim light. A low hum filled the room, almost like a distant whisper, repeating words I couldn't understand. I stepped closer to Emily, trying to shield her, but she moved back, almost instinctively. "No! Don't touch me," she cried. The paper slipped from her hands and floated slightly above the floor, as if lifted by an unseen force. My heart pounded in terror and disbelief. The room felt alive, threatening, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The whispers grew louder, forming a chorus of unintelligible words that made my head spin. I felt panic rising, but I also knew that I couldn't leave Emily alone. She was the key to all of this, whatever this watching thing was. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the room, faster than anything human could move. It swept past me and Emily in an instant, leaving behind a cold, heavy feeling. I stumbled backward, my hands brushing against the walls, trying to stay upright. Emily screamed, and the sound echoed through the hallway outside, sharp and desperate. And then the room went silent. Dead silence, except for the soft whisper of the paper sliding across the floor, as if inviting me to pick it up again. I bent down, my hands shaking, and grabbed the note. My eyes widened as I read the next message written inside, words that made my blood run cold. If you sit at the table, you will see. The real family never forgets, and neither do they. A sudden gust of wind blew through the room, though all windows were closed. The door slammed shut behind me again, harder this time, and I realized with a sick feeling that we were trapped. Something in this house, or perhaps tied to this family, was real, and it was dangerous. And then I heard it, a faint scratching at the door, slow, deliberate, like claws on wood. Emily clutched my arm tightly, trembling. "They're coming," she whispered. I still remember that night, the fear that clung to the walls of Emily's room, thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. The scratching at the door continued, slow and deliberate, and every sound made my heart leap into my throat. Emily was trembling beside me, her small hand gripping mine like it was a lifeline, and I could feel the raw terror radiating from her. I wanted to say something, anything, to calm her down, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could do was clutch her hand and try to steady my own breathing, even as the cold that had filled the room seemed to seep into my bones. The paper lay between us, the last warning Emily had shown me, the words burning into my mind, "If you sit at the table, you will see. The real family never forgets, and neither do they." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was serious. The scratching suddenly stopped, and the silence that followed was worse than the noise. It felt alive, like the house was holding its breath, waiting. Emily looked up at me, her eyes wide, desperate. "They're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're always here when someone tries to belong." My stomach churned, and I felt my hands grow clammy. I had never believed in anything like this, ghosts, spirits, curses, but the fear in Emily's eyes, the strange energy in the room, the way the shadows moved like living things, it all felt real. Too real. I didn't know if I was imagining it or if the house itself had become something alive, something dangerous. I slowly took a step toward the door, trying to see if I could open it, but my fingers barely brushed the handle before a cold draft slammed it shut with a force that made the frame shake. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and Emily let out a small cry. "Don't! Don't go near the door," she cried, hugging me tighter. I froze. She had never spoken like this before. I could see it now, her fear wasn't just of the house. It was of the people, or the beings, that had once been part of her family. Something in her past, something she had seen or known, had made her terrified of anyone trying to join that table, that family. I looked at her, really looked, and I realized for the first time how much pain she carried. The anger at the dinner table, the words about real family, the cryptic note, it wasn't just about me. It was about something older, deeper, something that had been hidden from me, from everyone who tried to belong. I wanted to ask her to explain, to tell me everything, but even opening my mouth felt dangerous. The room seemed to tighten around us, the shadows curling like dark fingers at the edges of my vision. The house was alive, and it was watching. Suddenly, a soft whisper came from the corner of the room, almost like a voice carried on the wind. I froze, my blood running cold. "You shouldn't be here," it said again, clearer this time. Emily gasped, and I could see her eyes darting to the shadows. "They're close," she whispered. "You have to leave. You don't understand what happens to people who sit at the table." I shook my head, trying to calm her, trying to show her that I was here for her. But even as I spoke, I could feel a heaviness pressing down on me, an invisible presence moving closer. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently, and a low, almost growling sound filled the room. My heart jumped, and I grabbed Emily's hand. We both shrank back against the wall, watching as the shadows seemed to twist and move on their own. I could hear something faint, scratching, whispering, breathing, coming from all around us. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice felt trapped. Emily's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and I realized that she wasn't just imagining this. Whatever it was, it had been watching her for years, waiting. I remembered the note again, the words I had read, and I felt a chill. The real family never forgets, and neither do they. What did that mean? What had Emily seen? I wanted answers, but I also knew we didn't have time. Something was coming for us. Something that didn't want outsiders, that didn't want me in this house, in this family, in this secret. I could feel it drawing closer, and the shadows seemed to pulse with life. And then I heard the softest whisper of all, coming from right behind me. A voice, familiar and terrible, whispered Emily's name, and she screamed. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, or at least, it appeared empty, but the air was thick with menace. I could feel it, something unseen, watching us, waiting for the wrong move. I held Emily tightly, and we both crouched on the floor, trembling, the paper lying forgotten between us. And just as I thought the moment couldn't get worse, a loud bang echoed from the hallway outside, like someone, or something, was trying to break in. Emily's scream pierced the silence, and I realized with a sinking heart that whatever haunted this house, whatever secret her family carried, had begun to act. It was no longer a warning. It was a threat. I still remember that night, the way my chest felt like it was about to burst, my hands trembling as I clutched Emily close to me. The loud bang from the hallway echoed in my ears, sharp and threatening, and I could hear the faint sound of scraping, slow and deliberate, as if claws were moving along the walls outside. Emily was shaking uncontrollably, her face buried against my shoulder, whispering over and over, "They're here, they're here." I tried to calm her, to tell her it was okay, but my own voice sounded small and weak against the heavy silence that had returned, thick and suffocating. The house no longer felt safe. It felt alive, awake, and aware of us, and every shadow in the room seemed to move, waiting for the next moment to strike. I looked at the note lying between us on the floor. My hands hovered over it, but I hesitated. Part of me wanted to read every word, to understand what Emily had seen, to uncover the truth that had terrified her for so long. But another part of me, deep inside, knew that reading it might make things worse. Whatever had haunted this family for generations seemed to follow anyone who tried to dig too deep. And now it was here, in our house, and it was angry. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, the sense that I was not just a stepmother but an intruder, and intruders were not tolerated. Then the door handle rattled violently. I froze. Emily's small hand gripped mine so tightly I could feel her nails digging into my skin. The rattling continued, faster now, more aggressive, and I realized with terror that whatever was outside was testing us, probing for a weakness. I wanted to protect her, but I didn't know how. My husband wasn't home that night, he had gone to a late meeting. It was just the two of us against something I didn't understand, something that had haunted his family long before I arrived. The shadows in the room seemed to shift and twist, taking shapes that my mind could barely process. It felt as if invisible eyes were watching our every move. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to act. I had to protect Emily, even if I didn't know what I was up against. I whispered, "We need to stay calm. Stay with me." She nodded weakly, her eyes wide with terror, and I felt her small hand in mine tremble. I looked around the room, searching for anything that could help us, anything that could block the door or keep whatever was outside from coming in. The furniture seemed useless. The air itself felt like a barrier, thick and heavy, pressing against us. My mind raced. What could I do? Then, just as I was about to grab a chair to barricade the door, a shadow moved across the ceiling, fast and silent, almost like it had no weight at all. I gasped, and Emily cried out, her small body shaking in my arms. The shadow lingered for a moment, then disappeared, leaving the room darker than before. I realized with a sick feeling that it hadn't just been a shadow, it had been something alive, moving with purpose. My heart raced. We weren't just being watched. We were being hunted. I tried to calm Emily, telling her we would be okay, but her fear was contagious. I could feel my own resolve wavering. My mind went back to the dinner table, to her words, "This table is only for real family." What did it mean? What had she seen that made her so terrified? And what would happen if I tried to sit at that table, to be part of their family? The thought made my stomach twist with dread. I didn't want to find out, but now it felt like I had no choice. I had to understand if we were going to survive. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the room, slamming the door shut behind us with a force that made the walls tremble. Emily screamed, and I clutched her to me, pressing her to the floor as the temperature dropped further. I could see my breath fogging in the dim light. A low whisper rose around us, faint at first, then louder, almost chanting words I couldn't understand. My ears rang, my heart pounded, and I realized with growing horror that the presence outside the door was not human. It was something older, something that had been waiting, watching, punishing anyone who dared to challenge it. I looked at Emily, whose eyes were wide and filled with terror, and I knew I had to make a choice. We couldn't stay here. We couldn't run blindly either. Whatever was in this house, whatever had haunted her family for generations, had been waiting for someone like me to step in. And now, by stepping into her world, by trying to belong, I had drawn its attention. My mind raced for a plan. The shadows were moving again, swirling along the walls, stretching toward us, and I could hear the faint whisper again, "You don't belong." I grabbed Emily's hand and whispered, "We have to go. We have to get out." She nodded, her small body shaking, and we moved toward the window at the far end of the room. But as we reached it, the glass fogged instantly, icy to the touch. I pulled back, realizing that leaving would not be easy. The house had trapped us, and the presence had made it clear it would not let us go willingly. I could feel its power, pressing down, making every step feel heavier. I felt like the walls themselves were alive, closing in around us. And then, a soft, deliberate knock came from the bedroom door, a single, slow knock, followed by another. My blood ran cold. It wasn't Emily, and it wasn't me. Someone, or something, was outside, waiting for us to make the wrong move. The shadows seemed to grow darker, the air heavier, and I realized that whatever this was, it had been patient for a reason. And now, it was ready. I still remember that night, the sound of the slow, deliberate knocking on the bedroom door, echoing like a heartbeat in the silent room. Emily clutched my hand so tightly I could feel her fear vibrating through me. The shadows on the walls seemed to move closer, twisting and stretching, as if reaching toward us. My chest felt heavy, my mind racing, trying to think of a way out. The icy draft from the window swept across the room again, though it was closed, and I shivered, wishing more than anything that my husband were home. But it was just Emily and me, trapped, facing something I didn't understand but could feel in every bone of my body. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might give away our presence to whatever was outside. I whispered to Emily, "Stay calm. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out." Her wide, terrified eyes met mine, but she didn't respond. She just shook, pressing herself closer, trying to make herself small and invisible. I knew she had seen things before, things that had haunted her for years, things that I was only now beginning to understand. She had always been different, cautious, guarded, like she knew the danger lurking in our family that I had ignored. And now that danger had found us. The note she had dropped, the whispers, the shadows, they weren't random. They were warnings. They were rules I didn't yet understand, rules I was about to break. The knocking grew louder, faster, more urgent. I could feel a presence pressing against the door, heavy and strong, as if testing its strength against the wood. I tried to steady my breathing, but the fear was rising in waves, each one stronger than the last. My mind went back to the words in the note, "If you sit at the table, you will see." The real family never forgets, and neither do they. What did it mean? The table? That dinner table? Was that where the danger began, where the family's curse or secret had started? And if I dared to belong, would it come for me? The thought made my stomach twist with dread. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently, and I jumped, clutching Emily to me. She whimpered softly, pressing her face against my chest. The shadows in the room seemed to shift and grow darker, stretching toward the door, then toward us. I felt something cold brush against my arm, like a whisper of ice, and I realized with terror that this presence was not just outside the door, it was in the room, moving with us, circling us, waiting for the moment we made a mistake. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it had been waiting a long time for someone like me to step inside. I took a deep breath and whispered, "We have to move. We have to hide." Emily nodded weakly, and we crawled toward the far corner of the room, behind her desk and the bookshelf. I tried to keep my breathing slow, but the fear made my chest tighten with every heartbeat. I could hear the scraping of something heavy moving along the floor, something deliberate and patient. I dared not look. I could feel it watching, waiting for the wrong move. The note lay on the floor between us, forgotten but still ominous. I wanted to grab it, to find some clue, but my instinct told me not to. Some things, I realized, were dangerous to know too soon. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, soft and urgent, almost like Emily herself, saying, "They want you to belong, but you must not." My blood ran cold. I realized the danger wasn't just about us being in the house. It was about me trying to step into this family, into a role I didn't fully understand. Emily had warned me, fought me, rejected me, all to protect me, and now it was clear that there was a force, a rule, a secret that had controlled this family for years. My mind raced. What had her father known? Had he experienced this too? Or had he ignored it, hoping it would not touch us? A sudden crash came from the other side of the room, the window rattled as if someone, or something, had slammed against it. Emily screamed, and I clutched her even tighter. The shadows grew longer, stretching like black fingers across the walls, and a low, whispering voice filled the room, soft at first, then louder, chanting words I couldn't understand. I felt the air tighten around us, making it hard to breathe. I could feel the presence circling closer, testing us, trying to force us to make a mistake. I realized then that we weren't just fighting fear, we were fighting a family secret that had been alive for generations, a secret that punished anyone who dared to step inside. And then, a cold, almost invisible hand brushed against Emily's shoulder. She cried out, and I spun toward her, but no one was there. My heart was pounding, my skin crawling with terror. The whisper came again, clearer this time, "You don't belong, you must leave." I felt it in my bones, the truth of the danger, and I realized that staying was not an option. But running, I knew, was not simple either. The house, the shadows, the secret, they would not let us go so easily. I held Emily's hand tightly, looking into her eyes, and whispered, "We have to face it. We have to know the truth, even if it's dangerous." She hesitated, tears streaming down her cheeks, then nodded. I felt her small hand squeeze mine with determination, and for the first time, I realized she was ready to share what she had been protecting me from all these years. And just as we braced ourselves, ready to uncover the family secret, the door burst open with a violent force, throwing us to the floor. The shadows surged forward, darker and stronger than ever, and I realized with terror that the secret was coming for us, right now. I still remember that night, the moment the door burst open, and the shadows surged into the room like living things, twisting and moving with a terrible intelligence. Emily screamed, and I held her close, trying to shield her as the room seemed to come alive with a dark presence. The air grew colder with every heartbeat, heavy and suffocating, as if it were trying to push us down, make us smaller, make us disappear. The whispering voices rose again, overlapping in a chaotic, menacing chorus. I could barely make out the words, but one phrase repeated over and over, cutting into my mind, the table, my pulse raced. That dinner table, the place that had seemed ordinary just hours ago, was at the heart of this, the source of the fear, the secret, the punishment for anyone who tried to belong. I looked at Emily, whose face was pale and terrified, and realized that she had known this all along. The anger at the dinner table, the cryptic note, her warnings, they weren't childish or irrational. She had been trying to protect me, trying to warn me about something I was only now beginning to understand. "Emily," I whispered, my voice shaking, "I need to know. Please, tell me what happens at the table." She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, and for a moment, she seemed frozen, torn between revealing the truth and keeping it hidden. Then, with a shuddering breath, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, the table chooses. The real family sits, and if someone sits who doesn't belong, it takes them." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first, and yet every instinct in my body screamed that they were true. My mind spun with questions. Takes them? Who? What? How? I wanted to scream, to tell her it wasn't real, but the shadows curling across the walls, the icy presence in the room, and the whispering voices left no doubt. It was real. And we were standing in the middle of it. Emily's hand shook in mine, her eyes pleading, and I realized that for years she had been living in fear, hiding the family secret, guarding it, and now it had finally caught up to us. The shadows grew darker, moving faster, stretching toward the corners, the ceiling, the floor, the walls themselves. The whispering voices turned into a low, grinding sound, like the movement of heavy chains. My stomach churned with fear and disbelief. I could feel the presence in the room pressing closer, cold and sharp like steel against my skin. Emily whispered again, "They can feel fear. If you panic, they know, they choose faster." Her words sent a chill through me. We had no choice but to stay calm, but calm seemed impossible. The room was alive, breathing, pulsing with something ancient and unforgiving. I realized that the note she had left, the warnings, the anger at the dinner table, they were all part of survival. Emily had been keeping me away from the table, protecting me from the fate that had haunted her family for generations. And now, standing in this room, surrounded by shadows that moved like living creatures, I understood that we were next if we weren't careful. The whispers intensified, almost deafening now, as if pressing against my skull. I could feel my courage beginning to slip, fear clawing at me like icy fingers. I held Emily tighter, whispering, "We will get through this. We have to. Tell me what to do." Her eyes, wide and desperate, searched mine. You have to sit at the table," she said, her voice trembling. "You have to face it, you have to belong, or they will take you." My mind froze. Sit at the table? Face it? Belong? The very thought made my stomach turn. How could I sit at a table that had been a source of fear, of generations of secrets, of power I didn't understand? But looking at Emily, seeing her trembling, terrified but willing to guide me, I realized that this was the only way to survive, the only way to protect her and myself. We moved cautiously toward the dining room. The shadows followed, stretching along the walls, the floor, the ceiling, whispering, hissing, pressing against us. The temperature dropped further, frost forming along the edges of the table, and I felt the icy grip of something older than memory. Emily took my hand, guiding me to the chair, her small hand shaking as she whispered instructions. "Sit, slowly, don't hesitate, don't look away, they watch everything." My chest felt like it was going to burst. Every instinct screamed to run, to escape, but I knew that if I faltered, if I refused, the shadows would consume us. I reached the chair. I could feel the presence all around me, wrapping its cold fingers around my body, watching, waiting. I inhaled slowly, trying to calm my pounding heart, and as I lowered myself onto the seat, the whispers turned into a low, almost satisfied sigh. The shadows paused, folding back into the corners of the room, but the weight in the air remained, heavy and ominous. Emily stayed beside me, trembling, and whispered, "You're safe, for now, but the table never forgets." And just as I began to breathe again, a sudden crash came from the kitchen. The shadows surged once more, darker, faster, moving as if the table itself had called them. I realized with horror that sitting at the table had not ended the threat, it had awakened it. Something else, something far older and far angrier, had been waiting for someone to sit, and now it was coming for us. I still remember that night, the moment everything came together, terrifying and revealing at the same time. The shadows had surged once more, filling the room with darkness that pressed against me and Emily from all sides. I could feel the presence, heavier and colder than anything I had ever experienced, as if the house itself were alive and breathing. Emily clutched my hand, trembling, whispering, "It's coming, you have to face it." My heart pounded, my body shook, but I knew she was right. Whatever had haunted her family for generations had been waiting for this moment. Sitting at the table was the key. It was not a threat alone, it was a test, a challenge, a way to see if I could belong. I realized that the table had chosen me, and now I had no choice but to face it. The whispers grew louder, almost forming words I could understand. Belong, prove, stay, or be taken. I closed my eyes for a moment, drawing in a shaky breath, and slowly opened them to see the table before me. It was ordinary in shape, familiar, yet it radiated a strange, almost alive energy, glowing faintly in the dim light. Emily stood beside me, guiding my hand toward the chair, her voice soft but firm. Sit, slowly, don't fight it, just belong. I hesitated for a heartbeat, staring at the table, the shadows curling at its edges, and then I lowered myself carefully onto the seat. The moment I touched it, the air seemed to shift. The oppressive cold and heaviness remained, but the whispers softened, and the shadows paused, as if watching me. I could feel the presence around me, strong and powerful, but not immediately hostile. I glanced at Emily, who nodded, encouraging me to stay calm. You're doing it, she whispered. You're part of it now. You're safe, for now. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to ask questions, to run, to escape, but instinct told me that this was the only way to survive. The table was more than wooden chairs, it was the center of a family legacy, a power older than anyone could explain. It had rules Emily had lived with all her life, and now it was letting me in, letting me belong. Then I understood, the real family wasn't just blood. It was a connection, a choice, a willingness to respect the rules and the history that had shaped generations. The shadows receded slightly, the whispers fading into soft murmurs, almost like a sigh of acknowledgement. Emily relaxed beside me, though she was still pale and trembling. It knows you belong, she said softly. It can't harm you, not yet. You survived the test. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. For the first time, I understood what Emily had meant at the dinner table. It wasn't a threat, it was protection. A warning. Only the real family, those who understood, could sit at the table safely. As the night continued, the air in the house slowly warmed. The shadows receded completely, leaving only the faint flicker of the lamps. Emily and I stayed by the table, holding hands, processing everything we had seen and felt. The house felt quieter now, less threatening, as if it had accepted me, and perhaps forgiven me for not understanding sooner. I looked at Emily and saw not just a scared, angry stepdaughter but a girl carrying generations of fear and wisdom, a guardian of a secret I would now help protect. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but relieved, and whispered, "We made it. We survived." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes, and for the first time, she smiled, a small, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. I realized that this night had changed us both. The fear, the shadows, the whispers, they were part of our story now, but we had faced them together. I had learned to listen, to trust, and to belong. And Emily had learned that someone could truly care for her, someone who would face the darkness by her side. As dawn approached, the first soft light of morning filtered through the windows. The house seemed calmer now, almost peaceful, though the shadows were never far away. I knew the legacy of the table and the real family would continue, but we had survived the night, and we had survived together. I held Emily's hand one last time and whispered, "You're safe now. We'll protect each other." If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.